Razer's new Blade is a beautiful and powerful gaming laptop, and while it's similar to last year's model in many ways, it's also $400 more expensive. For a product that's already pricier than the competition, that price increase raises some alarms. As you'd expect, the hardware on the inside is stronger and more capable at gaming under higher settings, but it's the new display that stands out as the most notable upgrade. It's extremely sharp and doubles as a touch panel, but does that justify the extra cost? Let's take a look. If you put Razer's new Blade next to last year's model, you might have a hard time telling the two apart. The only real difference being that the new Blade is slightly thicker at 0.7 inches, which is still impressively thin considering what's on the inside. At 4.7 pounds, it's not unusually light, but it's on the better end of the gaming laptop scale. Razer's bright green accents and the logo on the lid do stand out, but the Blade's largely understated and pretty sleek, which isn't something you can say about most gaming laptops. The black anodized aluminum chassis looks great, but it comes with one downside. It transfers heat so well that it's impossible to keep the Blade on your lap while gaming or watching HD videos. Is it a trade-off? Yes, but it's not a deal breaker. Apart from the GPU, this year's Blade is nearly identical on the inside to last year's model. It has the same processor, a quad-core Intel Core i7-4702HQ at 2.2 GHz, and the same RAM configuration with 8 GB of 1600 MHz DDR3 memory. For the new GPU, Razer's gone for the fresh NVIDIA 870M with 3 GB of GDDR5 VRAM on board. The 870M outperforms last year's 765M in every case, but this added performance comes at a cost. The 875M draws 100 watts of power, where last year's 765 only needed 75 watts. And given that Razer's using the same battery as last year, the new Blade won't last long on the go. When you push the GPU to its limits, the Blade will typically last just over an hour in our experience, although this can be extended a bit with conservative graphics settings. Otherwise, expect 3 to 4 hours of battery life during non-gaming sessions. The display on last year's Blade had a maximum resolution of 1600 by 900 pixels. Given the physical dimensions, it was adequate, but not impressive. This time around, the opposite is true. Razer went all out and opted for a 3200 by 1800 QHD Plus display with 10-point multi-touch capabilities. It's a magnificent screen that produces vibrant colors in any light, and its contents remain visible from every angle shy of 90 degrees. The Blade screen is impressive on many levels, but are its specs necessary for a gaming laptop? A 1080p or 1440p display would have been perfectly acceptable, and it's not really clear why a gaming laptop needs a touch panel. Yes, it's a display that's easy to appreciate, but its over-the-top features come at a significant cost. There's also the fact that you likely won't play any of your games at the Blade's native resolution, given that it would be far too taxing on any gaming PC if you're aiming for decent graphics settings, let alone the Blade. As such, that means you'll have to deal with some minor inconveniences. For one, some applications, including Origin, don't scale correctly. But more importantly, when you try to play a game at 1080p, you're treated to a small in-game display in the middle of a large black screen. The solution here is pretty simple. Set the desktop resolution to match the game you're going to play. You could always leave the desktop resolution at 1920 by 1080 to avoid this hassle, but then everything in Windows is slightly larger than it should be. There's nothing worse than a laptop with a poorly designed keyboard and a finicky touchpad, but these are things you'd never say about the Blade. The keyboard's chiclet-style keys feel great, and they're perfectly spaced. It's easy to draw comparisons to the keys on a MacBook Pro, which is a good sign. The touchpad is also worthy of praise with a smooth and responsive surface that works well with Windows 8's multi-touch gestures, presenting no issues whatsoever during our tests. The buttons below the touchpad aren't as pleasing as the rest of the inputs, being thin and slightly mushy, but they still get the job done. Looking at the inputs on the side of the Blade, nothing's changed since last year. On the left side, you've got the power supply connection, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and a 3.5mm microphone-headphone combo port. And on the other, an HDMI port and one more USB 3.0 connection. It's a shame that there's not an Ethernet port, but there's built-in 802.11 ABGN AC Wi-Fi and support for Bluetooth 4.0. If you want more reliable and faster internet access, you'll have to shell out for an Ethernet USB adapter. For a thin gaming laptop, the Blade handles demanding games, including Watch Dogs, admirably. You're best off aiming for high or very high graphics settings rather than ultra, but that's if you're chasing 60 frames per second. If you're okay with 30 frames per second, you can eke out a little more performance from the Blade's GPU and CPU in most cases. You can find other laptops that offer better performance for less money, but you ultimately sacrifice portability and build quality, the importance of which should not be underestimated. That aside, you won't be disappointed by the Blade's performance. You won't be able to play every game with ultra settings, but you can get close in most cases. The Blade that Razer supplied for our review is the 256GB model, which costs around $2,400 before taxes. The base model with a 128GB solid-state drive gets off the ground at $2,200, and the high-end model with 512GB costs about $2,700. The Blade is definitely a premium high-end laptop, and it's easy to balk at the price tag, But when the blade's in your hands, it's really hard not to fall in love with it. It's sleek, portable, and powerful enough to keep any PC gamer on the go in a good mood. Any model of the blade is a really nice laptop, and if budget's a concern, don't discount last year's model, which is currently on sale for $1,700. But if you've got money to spend, there's no other gaming laptop on the market that I would recommend more than Razer's new blade.